Hello, welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast. I'm Justin Sloan.
And I'm Paul Zeidman, and I'm happy to introduce our very special guest today. They are part of Echobend Pictures. It is Zubin Anklesaria, I hope I'm saying that right, and
Yep.
Ryan Turner. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having
Nice
us.
to meet you.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Yeah, so we always start off with the little, like, what have you been watching and listening, and then we'll dive into the two of you and your company, all the cool stuff. Real quick, so I've been watching the newest Ahsoka Star Wars TV show on Disney. I'm enjoying it. I'm sure there's haters out there because there always are of everything, but I try to just watch stuff for am I having fun or not having fun, and I'm having fun. So that's all I got to say.
That's cool.
Paul, anything good?
Yeah, actually, I've been watching that as well. I'm enjoying it. I haven't caught the latest episode just yet, but I think they're doing a good job. I think my only complaint, maybe it's a little slow in the pacing. They could probably pick things up a little bit, but so far it's intriguing, and I think they're doing a good job with it.
I feel like Ryan's more interesting.
I've been it was funny. I avoided it for 3 years, but I finally got COVID. And the show that I watched when I got COVID was Dope Sick. And I've heard so many wonderful things. It's like one of those things where you see these shows pop up time and time again, and you're just like, all right, when I get that time, I'm going to sit down and watch it. And it truly is masterful, I think, across the board, like as an ensemble piece, as its ethos, and just the performances. I thought it was absolutely stunning, and I could see why everyone was talking about it. And then from the feature side, there's a movie coming out actually in I think in a couple of weeks that I saw an earlier screening of, called A Million Miles Away, and Michael Pena's in it, but it'll be dropping on Amazon Prime. But it was a really sincere movie, and I think there's a lot of cynicism in general in a lot of movies these days, but it was just like a story about a guy that doesn't give up and really believed in it. He wanted to go to space, the first Mexican American to go to space, and really it was just a really beautiful story, and Michael Pena is incredible in it, and I would highly recommend, when it comes out, checking it out.
What's it called again?
A Million Miles Away.
Oh, okay, cool.
And for me, I started watching The Boys, which I know I'm like super late to the game. And funny enough, back in 2017, I auditioned for 2 of the roles, but I never. And I thought the script was. I thought the script was great, and I was like, it was one of those shows that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch it next week, and like 6 years passed, and I just didn't. I kept not watching it, and then I'm just in season 1 right now, and I really liked it. But I feel like I'm also the kind of person who goes back, and I'm the kind of guy who rewatches The Office once or twice a year, every year, just because it becomes like easy, like with all the, kind of decision paralysis. Sometimes it's just easy to put something on. And I recently restarted watching Monk. I don't know if you guys ever watched that with Tony Shalhoub.
Yeah.
Monk was, that's a deep. I watched Monk in middle school, and funny enough, I started becoming OCD after watching that show. And I started cleaning my room, and all the way until through college was like hospital clean. It was crazy. And my parents were like, oh, look, TV can have a good influence on children. And so, so I'm watching The Boys and rewatching Monk.
I have to ask you, what parts did you audition for? I mean, I've watched the show, so I'm kind of familiar with it.
But I like look at the show and I'm like, I laugh. I auditioned for A-Train.
Okay.
And then funny enough, and then I auditioned for Huey, which went to Jack Quaid, who, funny enough, I knew from being on the set of Hunger Games back in the day. And I was like, yeah, like Jack, that was right. I think that was kind of Jack's like kind of breakout role.
Mm-hmm.
And when he did, I was just like, man, I was like, yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah, I've actually seen him in a lot of things. I mean, he has a small part in Oppenheimer. He's in a couple of scenes for that.
Mm-hmm.
And
playing
he's
drums.
also, and he's also doing a lot of voice work. That he's Superman in My Adventures with Superman on Max, the anime style one.
Oh, cool.
And he's also on Lower Decks on the Star Trek animated thing.
Wow.
So
what's funny? He was also in I don't know if you remember. He was like a bit part in Logan Lucky, and he was like one of my favorite parts about that movie.
He was great in that movie.
He was like, it was like a kind of, I don't even. It was like he's just like such a silly character in that movie, and he only had a couple lines, and it just killed. It was like I laughed so hard. And I was like, damn, he's got it. So props to Jack.
Well, I'll tell him if he ever wants to come on the show and talk about writing. We're more than happy to have him. All right. So you guys are part of Echobend Pictures. So tell us a little bit about your individual backgrounds. I mean, like, how did you get into the business? Or because you both are, because as you were saying before we started, Echobend, like, you don't just do production, you also do post work and music publishing. It's a really diverse catalog. So, like, how did you fall into it, and also how did you connect to establish this company? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I can take it because I mean we met and became writing partners. So actually, that's how we are the co-founders of the company. So I think we started it about in the there's the winter of 2021, but we had been writing together for a couple years before that. My journey is an independent artist. I moved out to LA. I kind of just I knew I wanted to do film. I've known for a very young age. So it was just like not about if, it was when. And so I graduated from college, which I went to UC Santa Barbara. And I'd been making a lot of movies in college, web series, short films, like all sorts of stuff. And came out to LA to continue doing that. I got a job as an assistant editor on a movie that has not come out. I don't think you can find it anywhere. But that was a really cool experience. And yeah, and then just pretty much been freelance ever since, until we started the company, and which the company's kind of just a higher stakes freelance. Yeah, that was about 12, 13 years ago. And I've found odd jobs here and there. And I did comedy a lot, which actually Zubin and I both did UCB and but separately. And in trying to become a better director, I would take acting classes. And then I like a couple years ago, I studied with Corey Mandel's workshop, which is a really wonderful writing workshop that I really changed my whole perspective on writing and gave me some really valuable tools that I'm still using today. And yeah, but it's interesting because I was taking creative writing all the way back to college. And actually one of my professors is Aaron Wilson, who wrote The Secretary, amongst other projects. And it was a really cool, in the theater program in UC Santa Barbara, there was some amazing writing classes with some amazing teachers. Gosh, what's his name? I'll think about it, but there's like very famous playwrights that kind of came through the doors. And like, so I kind of got that angle. And so, yeah, I mean, we aligned very much creatively during that period. We laugh a lot about it because during that period we were meeting up every day to write stuff, and we actually didn't have a single script to show for those years of like working together. But what it led to was like a creative shorthand that still to this day comes into play. But yeah, I mean, Zubin, you can talk a little about your journey.
Yeah, but I went to USC and I was in business school, but I also, like, my freshman year, I had a roommate who was like a movie star. It was Alexander Ludwig. He was in the Hunger Games and he was the lead of Vikings. And he was getting a lot of scripts from ICM at the time, and they would come to our dorm room because he was a child actor. He was already in the studio system. And so we would get tons and tons of scripts. And growing up, I wrote novels starting from like 6th, 7th grade. I wrote like trilogies of novels. I look back, they were so bad, but I had like an affinity. I'm like, oh, I'm a great writer. And so I saw these scripts. And as you know, like when you read scripts, even professional scripts, it's so hard for them to be good, but I didn't know that. So I read all these scripts from professional writers when they came in, and I was like, man, these are either bad or they're just not that good. I'm like, oh, I can definitely do better. And you learned, I think, in screenwriting that to even get to okay is immensely difficult, and to be great is like off the charts difficult. But at the time I didn't know that. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a writer. I can do better. And so I started immediately studying screenwriting at USC and cinematic arts. And I got out of college and I was still writing. I did UCLA extension just to kind of keep myself honest, because I don't know about other writers, but I like staying motivated on your own independently when you're not being paid is just so difficult. And so I used the structure of UCLA extension to keep myself going. And at the same time, I was doing UCB and such, like doing a lot of sketch comedy and acting classes. And Ryan and I, funny enough, went to the same acting schools and the same acting school and the same UCB, and we never overlapped. And then I think in 2017 we met at a birthday party, and immediately just, you know, like there was just within 5 seconds, I'm like, oh, we're gonna be creative partners. And we started writing, and like Ryan said, I think it was funny. We met up for like from 2017 to I want to say 2019 for 2 years. We met up like very religiously. We met up easily weekly, if not more. And we got to know each other so well and know our creative process, but we certainly did not complete any scripts. I don't even know if we really completed an outline, to be honest. But we came up with a lot of really cool ideas and got to know each other as friends really well. And then in 2019, I just like our kind of like the journey, I started becoming a line producer. I came up in production, PAing on Marvel sets and on big budget Netflix like Ryan Murphy shows. And I then dropped down into high budget music videos, which is like the niche places in the industry. And I came up really fast as a line producer. And at that same time, Ryan and I were still writing, and we got an opportunity to do a little show with Facebook Watch where I was producing. We co-wrote, we co-directed, and then Ryan handled post. And so between the two of us, we took the whole process top to bottom. And we were like, oh my gosh, we should just build a company around this. This would be really fun. And then that was end of 2019, 2020, we started the company, but COVID hit and we're like, like, I remember the day before the pandemic, like fully hit and we shut down, we were working on the website. And then we had to like kind of put things on pause. Like the company was still around, but we just couldn't really do anything. And then we moved into our office in January of 2021 and then just started kind of manifesting, doing a ton of music videos and commercials. So that was kind of, you know, how we came up, and I was just focusing on line producing, and Ryan was, you know, doing a lot of creative and then the back end of post.
I think it's fascinating that you guys worked together. You said it was like 2 years. You met. I love this. You met religiously,
Easily.
and you never wrote anything.
Well, we wrote things. We just didn't finish things.
Didn't finish them. Okay.
Didn't
I can tell you,
well,
we wrote a lot. We wrote a lot of things. Just like a lot of ideas.
It's very interesting because like in the development, because as you mentioned earlier, like our company kind of has a wide breadth, which is generally what they don't recommend when you start a company. They usually say pick a lane and then expand outwards, and we're just kind of like, no, we'll do everything. And so like even to put decks together for like our capabilities, it's like there's like 20 different decks that we'd have to make, right? So it's like we one of the sectors that we really are interested in was TV and film and feature films, and so in the development of trying to create, you know, consistently good feature films, that's where I think just us knowing each other's creative tastes and trying to instill a process in our development process that leads towards a higher output of quality. That's where I think that part of it is literally, and maybe I could have misread this, but I've really tried to nerd out about different processes of successful, whether it's writers' rooms or showrunners or production companies or studios, that have these like golden periods where it seems like everything they touch turns to gold. And it's like, well, what were they doing in that process or that period that led to such a high level of output? And generally, I feel like the thing that I keep hearing about is this gestation period with ideas, and the gestation and allowing ideas to flourish as opposed to trying to break through a wall with your head, kind of like playing in this way or talking about this. Like, and I remember, because I've had a lot of writing partners through this time. Another guy that's been involved in the company, Jesse Pepe, was a writing partner of mine for many years. And we would meet up and there'd be some writing sessions where we'd just catch up on our day. We would just say, how are you doing? And it would organically become talking about these. And those conversations would end up manifesting in really interesting ways later on when you're getting into the page, where that, not only that camaraderie, but like, oh, it's almost like a much more fluid as you're taking and ingesting and watching. I think that there's a different part of your brain that it's accessing. And I think I'm sure that you've talked a lot about the strikes and the impetus of the strikes, but it's like there seems to be this very tech focused output scenario where they go, no, I pay you. If you're writing every day, it takes you X amount of days to write script. That's it, right? It's like very mathematical. But I think that creativity in general, you do, you know, if you light a fire, you will see results, but like, will you see consistently great results? Will you see create consistently great process? And I think so often there'll be like the Lord of the Rings for The Hobbit is the best example of what I've kind of really leaned into, which is like, when you have Lord of the Rings and you have 5 years of people that are loving a piece of work, living together in a place where they're scouting, they're creatively gestating, they're like talking about all these different ideas, they're showing concept art. You can walk and everybody is creatively building something for a long period of time. And then you have like the Hobbit movie series, which did not have 5 years and was like kind of just thrown together months before because of spot directors. And it was like hands out. And, you know, and I wasn't a part of either of those productions, so I'm speaking as a third party, but like from the outside, I go, well, that makes sense. One is set up for success. The other one is set up to fail. And so how do you consistently create that good work? And so going back to the way that Zubin and I would meet, I think there was a lot of that where it was not necessarily output from the perspective of like pages, but it was output from the perspective of chemistry and understanding. And if we had started a company not having that period of time, or even worked on the Facebook Watch show without having that previous period of time, it certainly would not have led to the results that we saw.
Which made I would say it made sense for the Facebook Watch show, like why we were able to do it, because when we did that show, the budget was minuscule and the timeline was insane because they gave us like a lump sum budget and a log line and said, and it was like, hey, we have to, in order to deliver this, it's like, hey, we have to basically start shooting in 2 weeks and then like deliver it like 2 weeks after or something like that. And to start with a log line and be like, hey, we need 8 episodes in a month is it's like insane. So I remember we wrote together, we broke the thing and wrote the series in like a week and a half. And while I was kind of doing pre-production based off of like casting, just based off of things that we were, you know, the train track was being built like right in front of us. But because I think we had spent 2 years just understanding each other's process and what kind of worked, we were able to write out that series really quickly, which I think if we had been starting from square one, just would have been impossible because you would have had to figure it out. Like Ryan and I have, Ryan and I have our own process that we do together. And I realize that about creativity is that I feel like, especially if you're working with a collaborator, especially with writing, it's not, I think there's like this thing where you look on the internet and there's like, hey, there's this way, and there's, you know, Dan Harmon, there's Story Circle, there's this, there's that. And those things are all valuable resources, but especially if you're a collaborator, the only thing that really matters is your workflow with your collaborator, right? Like my relationship and working relationship with Ryan works really well for us, but I would say almost any other writer it would be terrible because Ryan and I, our process is like we ideate together. Ryan does like a vomit pass, gives it to me, and I do like a page 1 rewrite based on I look at it, I go like, this is what I like, and I rewrite like 90%, and then he looks at and I give it to him, and he looks at my draft and he rewrites like a 75%, and we go back and forth, and we keep getting closer and closer. It's almost like we every draft that went by, we would just do less. We would change each other's work less and less, and by the end, we kind of would always end up at something we liked. And it's because I fully trusted him for what he was good at, and he really trusted me for what I was good at. And it just worked that way. But most writers, like the idea of like your writing partner just writing over your work is like the worst thing that could ever happen. But for us, it just works. And I think that was a big learning thing about like, oh, you know, it doesn't matter how you work with other people. That matters is how you work with the person you need to do the work with on that project.
Oh, that's great. So I wanted to ask, so now that once you started Echobend, so like how do you determine what projects you're going to work on? I mean, do you go out and pitch? Do people come to you and say, hey, do you guys do commercials? Do you do videos? I mean, how do you go about assembling that catalog of all of your different material?
Well, I'll jump in first because so we did our it's very organic and not normal. Like it's very much an extension of what it's like to be freelance. And by that I mean it's all relationships, it's all meeting, it's all organic growth. The first feature that we made as Echobend is called Me, Myself, and the Void. It's starring Kelly Marie Tran and Chris and Jack, who are these amazing you could check them online. They're really talented. And the writer director, Tim, came to a person who used to be my old roommate when he first moved to LA. Ryan Blewett, and Ryan knew I was starting a production company because I was telling everybody. And so he's like, hey, well, if you guys are looking for projects, you got to read this script. And so they brought us Tim's script, and I read it, Zubin read it. We were like, we love this. Like it was just one of those things. It was just like, wow, like literally it could have been something that we had written together, but we hadn't, obviously. But it was like this beautiful, beautiful script that had so much heart and so much comedy, and it was very simple and it could be very done on a lower budget. And so it's a very organic process of what we decide to do and not to do. A lot of times there could be, hey, we just want to work with this person, let's do that project. For when it's scripted, it's much more curated, I guess you could say, because obviously we're trying to create a brand of taste, of a sense of what we like. So that way, if you come to Echobend, you'll have an idea of what you're gonna get as a film or a show or a project. At this stage, when we're building, most companies in general will start from either a successful director, a successful actor, or somebody that goes, I have so much coming in, I got revenue, I could start a company and like pay people and like build up a team and or like, oh man, like I have a big investor very interested, like let's take this investment and build the company. We were neither of those things. I was surviving. Zubin was surviving, and the two of us were joined forces, and we're like, maybe the two of us could continue to survive. And through that, we just had this ethos of like, hey, we just want to work with cool people. We want to do projects that we say, scripts that touch the heart, the mind, and the soul, which it's essentially like it's going to move the needle in some way. Like I think we want it to stick with you, but we also want it to be something that is enjoyable to get through. I think we both come from a place of movies are escapism for so many people in the world. And not saying that all movies have to be silly or funny or this, but like we generally are drawn more towards those kinds of movies. And that's what we in our taste are. But we have more and more, as the company's grown, we have more people with more taste, which I think only then creates a greater, wider net. And if we really enjoy a director or a writer, we have a lot of scripts every week. We have our development meetings with scripts coming in just organically. And yeah, we're building it out. But I think that we generally, why we choose to do projects is a combination of, does it make sense from a relationship? Does it get to keep the lights on? Or when it comes to like the actual projects that we want to put our name brand on, it's like, how does this touch on the things that we want? How does this make the world or improve the world in some way?
Yeah, really cool. So I want to go back a step. So looking at like the early days of the foundation of the company and like what was going on with you two. So it sounds like you started a writing partnership, but then that didn't go anywhere, but you started the company and then that led to some writing, or what was the trajectory of all that? Is that correct?
It's funny. I would say like the writing together simultaneously went nowhere and went everywhere. Like without the foundation, like we wouldn't have a company if we didn't join as writing partners who did not finish scripts. But we, at the same time, like we needed that foundation, that creative partnership that was, founded on the principle of we are writing partners, right? That was like the bedrock of like the identity that I think we started our relationship as. And it's just funny because it became so much more than that. But like, I think sometimes like whether it works for companies, it works for probably individuals. I think something that like I now realize kind of in hindsight is that I think having some semblance of like a guiding identity is really helpful. Whether you're an artist, whether you're a company, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it gives you some sort of beacon, some sort of North Star to go towards. But I think the place that a lot of artists that I've seen, whether they're directors or writers or actors, the area that I see most people falter is they create such a strong idea of what their identity is going to be. Hey, I'm an actor. I'm a leading man actor. I only do drama, no comedy. Someone has like, I want to be Brad Pitt, and they create this identity and they start making decisions to try to get there, but they start discounting other opportunities because they go like, oh, comedy thing, no, UCB, no, this and that, because they have this idea of what it needs to be. And then they lose a lot of momentum. But I think for us, it was nice because we started with, hey, we're a writing partnership. We like we like sci-fi comedy. That's what we like. And we're going to be a writing partnership. But like very quickly, different opportunities came up. And I guess like, okay, I guess I'm a producer and we're co-writers. I guess we're not doing a sci-fi comedy. You'll direct, you're doing post. And things started changing. But like by riding with the waves, we started moving into bigger and bigger things. And I think funny enough, I know Ryan is working on a sci-fi comedy. And in the years to come, we'll be able to return most likely to the thing we actually set out to do. But if we had tried to, I think, beeline for what we thought our identity was, I seriously doubt it would have worked. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just something I've noticed now. And it's the same with the company. It's like we were like, hey, we're going to do TV and film. That's what we're going to do. And in the first 3 years, we've only, we've completed one. Admittedly, the gestation time on a feature is a long time, but we've done so many other things other than what we set out to do. And as a result, we're much closer to doing exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, like an example just to kind of jump off that, like the writing is reared its head in a bunch of different ways, whether it's been in the commercial world, writing for different brands and clients, pitching ideas creatively as scripts for like short form, or like we made an original series for Netflix is social media campaign called like Music Lab, which was like this idea of bringing in unsuspecting people into these kind of like lab tests to like promote different movies, or like how does Squid Game create anxiety? What is the music doing and why does the music do that? What is the science behind the music? So there's been this very roundabout way, but in the meantime, and the big lesson that I've learned in my day-to-day, and I'm sure you guys have touched on this a lot, like in terms of resistance as a writer, it's so hard everyone has their own walls. And so often you have, it's much easier. Like in COVID, my whole job was, I was like, I'm going to take all these workshops with the Corey Mandel studio. And then I'm going to finish my script just by myself. Cause I generally write with writing partners because it creates that accountability that I don't feel like I can create with myself. And I know that about myself. So if I'm with another person, I get more done. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. And it took me all of COVID, and I got one draft of this script done. Right. And now we have the company going. So there's all the responsibilities. Both of us have like 12-hour days just to start out. Right. And then sometimes it goes up to 14, 17, whatever. But in the meantime, we still have our eyes on the prize that we're trying to do. So the question is like, how do we carve out the time to still be going back to that place that we were, right? Meeting up every day and chipping away at a greater idea. And I think it was about 6 months ago, because I've had little sprints, right? I'll be like, okay, for these 3 months, I'll sprint and I'll get a draft out. And then I pay the physical toll. This time it was COVID when that happens. But it's like, how do you, it's never going to happen. There's never going to be a period where like, I'm going to, there's just like, oh, here's the time, right? Like, and carve out this lane, like, and here's a nice check, and here's the masseuse that's going to massage you after you finish every page. And it's like, I'm like, okay, so I just have to, like Zubin's saying, if we're still developing movies, we're getting things in, but at the same time, we started off as writers and places that we want to be. So I just have to add that. There's never going to be a time. I just have to carve it out and make sense of it. And that's a big learning lesson I found recently, is I just don't, there's never a good time. And I think Zubin said this once, and it really made, when Noah said it?
I said it, but no, say it, because I was like, oh, I was going to say this.
It really resonated with me, because it was like, if you have children, which neither of us have, otherwise we wouldn't be very good parents right now. But if you have children, and your child, has a soccer game, and you don't show up to the soccer game, that's kind of all that matters. It doesn't matter if you had work or it's like, did you show up, and were you there? And at the end of the day, you can have excuses. You can go, okay, yeah, well, you don't understand. Like, this person called me, or this celebrity had this. It's like, no, all that matters to that kid is this: did you show up or not? And if you reframe that in the way that you reframe something like writing, where it's like, you can have excuses. Like everyone has a reason for not finishing a script. Everyone has a reason for not writing. But like, if you treat it with that same level of intensity of like, yeah, like I can have excuses, but did I actually do it? And if the answer is no, then it's like, well, then you're never going to do it. You need to find that time because you're never going to get that time. That's a big journey. That's just, I know it's, we talked about tangents earlier, but that's a little bit tangent, but that's just the thing that I've really resonated with me really deeply about the writing process. And it kind of came from your question, Justin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's smart. Like what you guys are both saying. Oh, go ahead, Zubin.
No, please.
I was just saying what you guys are both saying about, yeah, having like basically other paths that can get you back to where you belong. Like I started in video games. I started trying to be a screenwriter, but I'm like, so this is always what I'm preaching is like, you got to be open to opportunities and see where it's going to bring you, because if you're too narrowly focused, for example, I was talking to somebody the other day, they're saying like in this path, so many people are going to school now and trying to become, video game writers. Same thing with screenwriters. There's way too many people trying to do it with the amount of jobs that are open. So yeah, what would be your advice to all those people out there trying to become screenwriters or trying to do whatever it is their dream is? It's very competitive. Do you have any words of wisdom?
Think about this. Oh yeah, I definitely have. Funny enough, I feel like my words of wisdom, I realized, I was like looking it up and I realized that kind of like George Lucas actually gave the same piece of wisdom like decades ago, which was like, if you want to be a filmmaker, study history, do like the technical craft. To me personally, like having been to SC and like really appreciating what like a production program or what all those things do bring. And it's not to discount that film school doesn't do anything, like it totally can. But at the same time, just what I've noticed is that like on a technical craft level, everything, like the things that I learned from filmmaking to me are best learned in the situation by actually doing. But the thing that's much harder to reconcile outside of an academic situation is like kind of cultivating your mind to have a better idea of the kinds of things philosophically that would be interested in tackling, right? That like sometimes you have to go deeper into exploration, whether it's history, whether it's philosophy, that I actually think is much more interesting, because people who experience more life and know more about life, whether from living it or from learning it, they have usually, to me, more interesting things to say, which is why, to me, on the whole, when you see like really successful writers, the older and older writers, they have more to say usually about the world than like an 18-year-old, simply because they've experienced more things, right? And I kind of like realized that, and I don't know if that kind of like plays in, but like studying, if you want to be a good writer, you do need to understand the craft of screenwriting, because that's like an immediate, to me, if you want to be a screenwriter and you don't know screenwriting, like immediate disqualifier. But that's the technical craft of like actually screenwriting, like that's like not that hard to get. Like within a week, you can get to a proficient enough level that you could not be completely laughed out. But like what you're writing about, that is way harder to cultivate, right? Like that's just like trial and error and making, writing scenes, like writing a lot of bad scenes to realize why they're bad, so that you start finding your way into better scenes, and like structuring it. That's the thing I think that matters like way more than anything, because I see a lot of scripts that are written, formatted correctly, but I'm like, that doesn't make it a good script.
Like from a career perspective, how to make a living, which I think was what most people are, like you're saying, there's not enough jobs for way too many people. So how do you make a living? And that's a greater, like being freelance, I've had to just come face to face with that, because literally if no one calls me, I don't make any money. That's just the reality of the situation. So how do I get more people to call me? It's not by sending resumes out. Like I learned that was just a waste of my time in LA. I was on Craigslist every day submitting my resume. The only time I ever got a job interview was when my friend was like, I saw he was on the company on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey, you work for this company? He's like, yeah, let me get you that interview. And that was the only time I got an interview. I was like, man, what was I even doing submitting resumes? I could have just gone to LinkedIn and like found my friends and and so I think that's the lesson. So there's a lot of things about like, are you in LA? Are you in, where are you? And I think the joy of writing is you could be doing that anywhere, right? You could be doing it not in the city. So there's a lot of screenwriters that still move to LA. So what is the benefit, or why are people in this hub? And it's like there's two fronts to that. As an artist, you have to find a way to pay your bills, whether that's, obviously a lot of actors are waiters. For me, I was an editor, right? And people paid for editing more so than they paid for writing or directing. And if you're good at editing, then it snowballs and you can get more work and you can pay your bills and you can survive barely, hopefully. But I think that there's like two facets of approach. Like I'll kind of there's two different friends of mine that took two different paths that I'll kind of describe. So one of my friends, he was very direct. He was like, I'm going to do I'm going to be a PA, then a writer's assistant, and like that path, right? Working up in the studio in a show. And in the meantime, he was submitting to every writing contest there known to man. And I ended up meeting him because we did one of the Doritos commercials together, because every year he was taking a shot into that to win the million. Our year we made it to the finals, and then next year he won the full thing. And he'd done it 5 years in a row. Every year he'd submitted, or 6 years in a row. He also got into the Nickelodeon Fellowship, which is another writer's fellowship. And so he submitted every year to that, every year. So he very much looked into like, what are the things that move the needle? And my whole year is structured around making sure that while I'm working in the studio world and I'm working my way up in there into the writer's room from the standard process, I'm going to be taking these shots, these Hail Marys, like the Sundance Writers Lab, like the Nichols Fellowship, the Austin Film Festival, like all of these things that are legitimizers the industry actually pays attention to, because people are always on the hunt for great scripts. Like literally, they become bidding wars when a great script drops, because people are like when the Blacklist drops, people are like, I need those scripts because they're already pre-qualified. And so that's one path, is like, you just focus, you pay your bills, and you just keep taking those shots. And the important thing to do is like keep critiquing and improving. Don't just submit the same thing over and over. And funny enough, in The Million Miles Away, bringing it back to the movie I watched, that's what it is. It's like he literally submits to be an astronaut every year. And there's a scene in the movie where they go, well, what are you doing this year that's different than last year? What have you added? You know, and one facet could be like, well, I've gotten better at writing because I've written for 10 hours a day or like, oh, this year I watched way more movies, so that's why but it's like, that's the important thing, to constantly be improving. The other side, the other facet, which is like the more freelance kind of rogue path, is just to be building relationships and getting people to know you as a writer, because actors want scripts, right? So like there's actors today working in big fields, and like Zubin said, a lot of the scripts coming on their plate are not ones they want to be doing. They're just ones that they go, oh wow, the right manager or whatever sent them to me, and like they read it and they're like, oh. And again, I'm not trying to say anything. I know writing is very difficult, so everyone's just doing their best, and we don't know the caveats behind what led to those scripts. But in general, most people are not jumping up and down with every script that they get in their inbox. They're going, okay, what am I in for? So if you know that and you're going, okay, well, what's going to really move the needle? Who do you know in the industry or know anybody? How do I then say, like, for example, with Zubin's friends, like, how do I know he's an actor? I know if he says he's going to be a part of a project, that he's going to actually move the needle in some way. So if I know, then I sit down with the actor and I say, what's your dream role? What do you really want to do that no one's allowed you to do yet? Okay, I really want to be in a heist movie. Great, heist movie. Okay, now you know something. Is there a role? Like, do you want to be Danny Ocean? Like, which one do you want to be? Cool. Now you've tailor fit this role for this person. That's their dream role that they've always wanted. You're writing it for that person. They're probably going to be creatively involved. They're going to be probably creatively invested. Whether they're paying you or not, ideally they're paying you, but maybe they're not. You go off and you write it on spec. But now when you're finished with that script, you have this actor that now was developing it with you that might be willing to help you take it out into the industry together. So it's essentially working smarter, not harder. It's okay, now we have this script, and maybe the actor goes, you know what? I love this idea. I don't want to do a heist movie anymore. But now you have a finished script, and at one point it was enough to attract a very talented actor. Now you can try to get another actor on board, right? And I think keep doing that. Or I know a director that just made this really successful movie, and him or her are looking for their next movie. I want to talk with them and see what their dream movie is like, and I want them to make my script come to life. So like, those are the two different paths that I've seen be successful, because it's more pointed. It's literally like, I'm going to just focus on the relationship. I'm just going to go on LinkedIn and see who works there. And there's so often this sense of, okay, I'm just going to make a great script and that's it. And it's like, well, your job begins once that script's done, because now you have to get it into people's hands, and people are not going to open that inbox unless you are validated by somebody they know. So anyways, that's kind of what I would say I've taken.
Great advice. As we get close to wrapping it up here, I'm going to ask one more quick question, like a rapid fire one, and I'll throw it back to Paul, which is, so how do you identify if you were at a conference or in an elevator or whatever, somebody says, what do you do? Are you throwing out like 5 titles, or are you like, I'm up, reach you? What do you got?
Depends who asks me. If it's someone like if especially like I spend like half my time in San Diego where I'm from, and if I know that no one wants anything from me, I tell them exactly what I do. If I'm in LA and I know that like a bunch of people are gonna bother me, truthfully, I usually lie about what I do. It depends. Like that is the actual, that's regrettably the truth, because that's the thing about this industry is like everybody, a lot of people, they want, and they take, but they don't really consider the giving part. And we try to structure our company very much around giving, and people know that, which is why when people come, they know that we have a high propensity for giving, which is really great for us, but also like it almost does make us a target of a lot of people asking us for stuff. And now it's just like, I want to help, everyone, but I can't help 10,000 people. Right. So sometimes I lie about what I do.
Yeah, I think I will generally just say creative person, filmmaker. I start broad, and then if they're interested, I can get more specific. Cool. Because at this point we're doing so many different roles. We're writing sometimes, we're directing sometimes, we're editing sometimes, we're producing sometimes. So rather than overwhelming people, I just go, I'm in the film industry, and like what and like we could talk more about, I can show you things we've done or what have you.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
Great.
Paul, what do you got? Anything more?
No, that was what I really want to know is, so where can people find out more about Echobend? I know you have a website, so I'll let you give the address for that so people can check out your portfolio.
That one's simple. That's just echobend.com. And you can see a lot of the stuff we've done. It really is a really wide variety of things. But I think
echobend.com. Me, myself, and the Void is touring festivals. There's a project called Morning that we're involved in that we're very excited about, that hopefully in the next couple of years you'll be hearing about. We are always, I'm a big advocate for mentorship, so I love what you guys are doing too with the podcast, and I'm a big fan of like sharing knowledge and raising people up. And I think, in the LA, we've tried to build a community of like-minded people that are just in it for the joy, but we can also do the business part too. And so, anybody that really resonates with that message, they're always welcome to reach out to one of us. We can hop on a Zoom and share any more knowledge that we have. Really appreciate like you guys, and I know we have a tendency to talk a lot, so apologies for
it's quite okay. So the very last question is, so you said you're open. So what if someone says, hey, I've got a script looking at what you guys have done, can I send you a query letter? Because I know places in LA, they get bombarded with a deluge of query letters. So are you prepared for that?
Yeah, we have a submission. We do have a submissions, like Ryan, was it submissions at echobend.com?
Generally I think a lot of people are just covering their legality, because if someone sends a script and they prove that they can send a script, even if we were developing this project years before, the second they send the script, they can technically say like, it's like the ideas, and it's like that. So I think in general, we like to meet the people before any queries come in, because we just want to vibe people out and make sure that they align with our ethos, and we're not like backed by a big investment funds. So I think we're not going to be competing for, the $1 million purchases of scripts. Mm-hmm. We're looking for people that are looking to collaborate. In the dream world of what we're building is there's a lot of creative bureaucracy that I find that I found in this industry, where you're spending more time focusing on the politics than you are on the actual craft. And you're navigating egos, and you're navigating, and it's like, I just want to make something, and I want to make it the best. So please help me make it the best, and that's what we're trying to create. So like creatives that really, it's a creative community built by creatives. So there's not any of these notes coming in that are truly like, I need to justify my paycheck. Here's a note. It's more just like, hey, when I read this, I felt this. Is that what you were going for? And if not, here's some tips on maybe how you can make me as an audience viewer change my perspective. And whether I represent 10 people or represent a million people, you have to decide as your own writer, but just know that this is my perspective, and I think that approach to notes is how I like to be talked to. So that's how we like to talk to people.
That is great. Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. Zubin Anklesaria, Ryan Turner of Echobend Pictures, and it's echobend.com.
Echobend.com.
Fantastic. This has been phenomenal stuff and really, really helpful. Ed, you're giving up everybody a lot to think about. It's really good.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
And listeners, if you can go check out all their films, I'm sure they'd appreciate it. And check out, all our past episodes, give us reviews. We always love that. Spread word of mouth. And of course, once again, I'm Justin. You can find my books on Amazon.
And I'm Paul. You can check out my screenwriting blog at maximumz.blog. I've also got books on Amazon. I'm also on the socials at maximum_Z on Twitter and at Pez Screenwriting on Instagram. Like he said, he's Zubin, he's Ryan, he's Justin. I'm still Paul. And this has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.